Ohio faces a critical need for infrastructure upgrades, particularly when it comes to roads and bridges. That's according to the American Society of Civil Engineers report card. But finding the funding to support projects to make improvements can actually be pretty challenging. Today, 13 Action News anchor Josh Krupp looks into how you play a role in approving just how much money goes towards new infrastructure across the state. We also look at where other funding is coming from, plus how Ohio differs in its approach to infrastructure when compared to other states. Ohio's infrastructure is the big story today. Ohio's roadways and bridges carry the third highest volume of goods being transported in the U.S. and accommodate the sixth most vehicle miles traveled. This makes Ohio an essential tool when it comes to the national economy. The American Society of Civil Engineers report card shows much of the state's infrastructure is in mediocre and poor standing. 18 categories were studied, from aviation and bridges to transit and wastewater. The grades range from a B for rail to a D when it comes to road and transit. However, despite the low grades, the ASCE says this is actually an improvement from past year's grades. Meanwhile, maintaining Ohio's infrastructure costs the state a lot of money. According to the National Bureau of Economic Research, infrastructure costs have been increasing as expenses related to construction, development, and maintaining all of those assets also increase. So far this year, more than $15 billion has been put towards infrastructure projects all across the state. That covers more than 1,000 projects, most of them falling into the transportation sector. Meanwhile, Ohio maintains one of the most extensive and heavily traveled road systems all across the country, causing some roads to wear down quickly. According to the ASCE, the report shows that 31% of Ohio roads are in poor or fair condition. In fact, this week, Governor Mike DeWine signed off on the state's $11 billion two-year transportation budget, that is. The funding will support critical infrastructure projects all across Ohio. More than 90% of that funding will go towards maintaining and improving existing roads, bridges, and other infrastructure out there. The budget also increases funding for highway safety improvement programs by $6 million for the fiscal years 26 and 27. It also allocates $150 million to develop truck parking facilities on state-owned land. Also, to help maintain the roads, Ohio collects a fuel tax. Drivers pay a state tax of 38.5 cents per gallon of unleaded and 47 cents for every gallon of diesel. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, in the first 3 months of 2024, Ohio collected just under $700 million in gas taxes. That money actually makes up less than 8% of the state's total tax revenue. This shows that Ohio is more reliant on gas taxes than other states, with gas taxes making up less than 6% of state revenues in Pennsylvania, Illinois, and Michigan. Still, this civil engineer report card says more funding is required to narrow the gap between what's available and the funding that's actually required here in the state. Meanwhile, Ohio voters will decide on the future of a program that funds local infrastructure projects. Early voting actually begins next week. And 13 Action News anchor Josh Krupp is live to explain what will appear on the ballot. Josh?
Yeah, Tina, we're talking about the State Capital Improvement Program, also known as SCIP. It'll appear on the ballot as Issue 2 across Ohio. This program has been around since 1987, but it is not permanent. It needs reapproved. It has been overwhelmingly 3 times since 1987. Local governments across Ohio hope voters give it the green light for a 4th time in the coming weeks. If that does happen, the state would be allowed to issue up to $250 million in bonds for the next decade to pay for those infrastructure projects across local communities in the state, including things like stormwater, wastewater treatment, roads, bridges. The program has funded more than 19,000 grants and loans for projects like these across Ohio since this program began. And for many local governments whose tax bases are only so big, the SCIP represents a major portion of the money that they get to improve infrastructure.
You have a limited number of people that live in those villages, and water and sewer systems are tremendously expensive. So any help that those entities can get for those projects, can keep your utility bill from skyrocketing to an unaffordable amount.
And Tina, issue 2 would not increase taxes. There's also no organized opposition to this proposal. The deadline to register to vote in this election so you can weigh in is Monday. Early in-person and mail-in voting begins the next day, next Tuesday. Tina.
All right, thanks so much, Josh. From there, Ohio home to more than 44,000 bridges. According to the ASCE, 42% of those bridges are in fair or poor condition. Remember when we told you about this? In March, the National Transportation Safety Board released a report of bridges that may be at risk of collapse. 2 of those bridges are here in Toledo. The NTSB says the Martin Luther King Jr. and the Anthony Wayne bridges could be at a risk for a couple reasons here. First, they're older bridges and they're not subject to the modern building standards. The NTSB also says this channel is frequently used by larger ocean vessels. We know a lot of the freighters come down the Maumee River. Plus, the NTSB says the bridges have not undergone what they call a vulnerability assessment. It's based on recent vessel traffic. That means we simply don't know whether the bridges are at risk of collapse if something like a freighter were to hit it. The NTSB says there are 68 bridges nationwide that fall into this category, and it's calling on the owners of those bridges to be proactive.
Frankly, we've been sounding the alarm on this since the tragedy occurred, which is why we're recommending that those 30 bridge owners take action now.
Now, both bridges here in the Toledo area are owned by the Ohio Department of Transportation. ODOT telling 13 Action News in a statement that it reviewed the bridges following the collapse of the Francis Key Scott Bridge in March of last year in Baltimore and determined protections were in place. But the agency says it'll take a second look at the bridges that were identified in this new report and follow all of the recommendations. Meanwhile, in Michigan, state officials have worked to correct a lot of the state's infrastructure in recent years. Over the past 5 years, investments from the state and federal lawmakers have helped make improvements to infrastructure, also close investment gaps and expand system services. In fact, since 2022, Michigan's also received billions of dollars in funding from the BIL, the IRA, and the CHIPS Act, which additional funding is anticipated through next year. That money then goes towards a number of projects to fix things like the roads, the bridges, the railways, and improve water quality. Michigan also has a way for you to track the state's overall progress when it comes to infrastructure. This is a tool that displays information on funded projects. It includes how much is going toward each project, where they are, when they'll be completed, and you can also take a look at the projects that are happening right near you. All you have to do is go to 13abc.com. We've posted a link.